This past summer, I had been spending most of my time in my family's apartment during the day just enjoying my time away from school. At least, that was until about a week into August, when someone tried to break in. After that, whenever my parents were at work, I chose to go stay at my older brother's apartment because I didn't feel comfortable being alone. You see, I had just turned 14, and the majority of my time was being spent playing video games, or being out by the apartment's pool to beat the intense Texas heat. I had gotten myself into a routine since I knew that both of my parents left for work at around 8:30 in the morning. I would typically wake myself up around 8 so that I could spend some time with them, and then as soon as they left, it was game time, which is what I would do until lunch. That morning, I woke up and sat in the living room with my dad for a bit while he waited for my mom to finish getting ready. The two had to carpool this summer because our second car got totaled in an accident. But as soon as my mom was ready, we said our goodbyes and my parents left the apartment. I heard their car start and pull off, and I knew that the apartment would be mine for the next couple of hours. I immediately made my way into my bedroom and turned on the PlayStation. And as it booted up, I ran to the bathroom real quick. As I was coming out of the bathroom though, I heard something odd. It sounded like the click that sometimes you would hear when the front door would open. I just assumed that one of my parents had forgot something, so I went to greet them. But when I approached the door, I noticed that it was slightly cracked open. I thought to myself, that's odd, but when I looked outside, I didn't see anything. I just assumed that maybe my dad didn't shut the door all the way, and the wind or something opened it. No big deal, right? Too bad I was wrong. After closing the door and making sure that it had been closed all the way, I proceeded to go back into my bedroom and get ready to play. The issue came as soon as I walked through the threshold of my bedroom door, turning to face my TV. My eyes passed the window that was positioned right above my bed. That window just so happened to be the window that was right next to the front door of our apartment. Now, I usually keep the window closed with the blinds drawn, but I tend to keep one small section of it cracked open because my cat likes to look outside when she hears something. And as my eyes passed through the window through the tiny crack in the blinds, I saw that there was someone standing outside of my apartment, right in the front of the door. My heart started pounding, and my eyes widened as I tried to stay calm. I figured that my best bet would be to slowly make my way to the front door and hopefully lock it. So I took a deep breath, mustered up all of my courage, and slowly walked out of my room toward the front of the apartment. Just as I rounded the corner to the door, I saw the handle turn. I froze. The door swung open ever so slightly, and clear as day, on the other side, I could see a man looking in. He was wearing a camo shirt, which was strange considering how hot it was outside, and we were nowhere near the woods. When I saw him, I gasped, and he clearly wasn't expecting anyone to be home because as soon as he knew that I was there, he took off. The man turned around and ran down a small outdoor hallway between the apartment building. As soon as he was no longer right next to the front door, I stepped forward and slammed it shut. I locked both of the locks and ran back into my bedroom for my cell phone. I called my mom to tell her what happened, and she assured me that she and my dad were on their way home. Once they got there, we filed a police report only to find out that our apartment complex had actually been victim to a series of robberies and break-ins over the previous month. For the rest of the summer, I decided to stay at my brother's apartment. It just seemed safer when no one else was home. It was just after our family dinner when we heard a knock at the door. My dad looked at me and my sister, asked if we were expecting the neighbors or anything to come by after dinner, but we both shook our heads because we weren't expecting anybody, and my mother had the same response. None of us knew who it might be, so my dad decided not to keep them waiting any longer and went to check who was at the door. I went with him because I was curious who it might be, but when he opened the door, I didn't recognize the man at all. It was a tall, elderly-looking man who had a lot of scars all over the side of his face, and his jaw seemed to be a bit off-center as well. My father asked politely if he could help the man, to which the man replied, "Is Sean here? Can you tell him Jonah is here looking for him, please?" His tone was very polite at first, but we didn't know who he was talking about. My dad replied by letting him know that no one by that name lived here. We didn't know any Sean. This clearly seemed to agitate the man, who particularly took a step back in shock. "What do you mean?" he asked slowly, raising his voice. Sean told me when I get out to come here and I'd have a bed. It was then that my dad began to use his hand to usher me back away from the door. Look, sir, there is no one here by the name of Sean. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to ask you to leave though. I'm trying to enjoy the night with my family. I hope you have a good evening, my father said before closing the door and promptly locking it. My sister and I ran over to the couch to look out of our window to see where the stranger was going, but we were surprised to see him standing in our driveway still, pacing back and forth. It almost looked like he was talking to himself, but we couldn't hear anything. This went on for about 2 minutes before we saw him turn and begin walking back to our front door. I let my dad know, and just as the man began to knock, my father was already at the door unlocking it. Sir, please. There is no one named Sean here, but if you would like, I can let you use my cell phone to call someone. But before my dad could finish his sentence, the man had pushed past him and began walking into our home. My dad began to yell at him, but when he raised his voice, the man got really aggressive and swung at my father. None of us knew what to do. We were all terrified. Sean, the man began yelling as he walked through our house. Where are you? And he made his way down the hallway toward our bedrooms. My dad got up from the ground and told us all to run to our neighbors. We all went sprinting out of the house as fast as we could. We could still hear the man yelling for Sean, whoever that was. As soon as we made it into our neighbor's porch, we rang their doorbell. They answered and quickly noticed how terrified we all were and the blood on my father's face. They brought us all into their home and we proceeded to call the police. It took them about 15 minutes to show up, but once they did, they were able to apprehend the man. It turns out that he had just been released from the prison that was only a few miles up the road, and there was someone named Sean who had promised him a place to stay. The address that Sean gave him was our house, but the man didn't believe us and thought that we were trying to trick him or something. My father ended up not pressing charges, but asked the police to remove the man from our property and told him that if he came back, he would be going back to jail. When I was in my senior year of college, my buddy Skylar and I managed to get a small house off campus where just the two of us lived. It was great because it gave us a lot of quiet space to study and get our work done. And if we wanted to, we could also have guests over without having to worry about the dorm's rules. The issue came when sometimes I would get home from working at the grocery store and it would be late at night and there would be random people in our house and I had no clue who they were. I never minded company, but Skylar and I had talked about letting one another know when we had company over. Sometimes he would forget to text me, and it was no big deal, but I would always hit him up to let him know, hey, just give me a heads up next time. One day though, we both learned why it's a good idea to know who should and shouldn't be in the house. You see, I had just finished up a double shift covering for a coworker, and I didn't get off work until about 11:30, and by the time I had gotten to our house, it was closer to midnight. I walked up the stairs, opened the door, and what do I see? A stranger in our house appeared to be sleeping in the chair in our living room. I let out a sigh and simply closed the door behind me and made my way into my room. After using the bathroom and getting ready to go to sleep, I decided to text my roommate because at this point, I could hear whoever it was walking around the living room. I text Skylar and simply said, hey man, could you ask your friend to keep it down? I have to get up early tomorrow to get things done. I appreciate it. After that, I put my phone down and tried to get some sleep. But before I could even close my eyes, my phone began to buzz. Skylar was calling me. I answered right away, and before I could even say anything, he asked me what I was talking about. He said, yo, I didn't even have anyone over tonight. I'm actually not even home right now. I'm at Cooties. Cooties was the bar that we would go to sometimes. I asked him what he was talking about, and that's when he said, is there someone in the house right now? If there is, you have to call the cops. Before I could respond, I heard a sound that sent chills down my spine. Whoever was in my house began quietly tapping on the outside of my bedroom door. I dropped the phone as I hopped off my bed and across my room to put all my weight against the door. I began yelling from across the room, Skylar, call the police, he's trying to get in. I could feel the pounding of the intruder's foot against the door of my bedroom. All I could do was hope that Skylar managed to hear me. Over time, the kicking at the door turned to a knock. I could hear the person pacing back and forth in the hallway, but thankfully, it wasn't long before I could see the flashing red and blue lights outside my window. It took the police less than a minute to enter my house, and I'm not sure if the intruder didn't even realize they were there, or he just didn't care, but they caught him standing in the hallway right outside my bedroom. Once he was in custody, I came out of my bedroom to talk to the police, and it just so happened my roommate had made it home at the same time. The officers asked us if we had recognized the man, but neither of us had any idea who he was. They found his backpack on the couch, and when they looked inside, they found a bunch of our stuff. Nothing expensive, just a bunch of fake silverware and some fancy-looking dollar store plates. Underneath all of our stuff, they also found a small bag of powder, which they said was some sort of amphetamine. So it's likely that he saw my roommate leave for the bar and thought he could get some quick money by breaking in. But when I got home, he pretended to sleep in the chair, hoping that I would assume that he was a guest, which worked. Thankfully, my roommate had received my text and was so quick to call me. Otherwise, I don't know what would have happened.